The following is a presentation of the Boltup Sports Media Network.
Here comes pressure, throws it to Eckler on the screen. He's got a block to the 10, to the 5, into the end zone.
High pass. Did Williams make that catch? My goodness.
For a first down, Herbert with time. Now running out of time. Throws on the run. Down the sideline. Caught in the end zone. Keenan Allen for the touchdown.
Throws, and again it's intercepted. And that's Asante Samuel.
Here's another one. Watch out.
How did it feel when Derwin James absolutely powerbombed the out of you on national television?
You're listening to the Shock Therapy Podcast with Tyler Lawrence and Zach Alfers.
And we're back, and I gotta say, the Raiders are just doing what things that Raiders do. They ended up just firing their head coach and general manager. It's kind of the big news, and it's not Charger news, but it's AFC West news. I think we need to talk about it a little bit because over the last couple of weeks, the Raiders have lost to the Lions 26-14. They got blown out by the Bears 30-12. They squeaked out close wins against the Patriots, Packers, Steelers. They lost to the Steelers. They squeaked out a close game to the Broncos. Last season, they go 6-10, 6-11. This season, they're not off to a hard start, and they got a lot of rebranding to do in Vegas.
Yeah. I think initially when I saw the news, it was just a very, very typical Raider decision. I think a lot more than just Mike McDaniels. This ownership group, the GM in Las Vegas, needs to take a lot more blame on this. It's a very, I understand making a move because things aren't going to your expectations, but it seems a very, it's not our fault. It's Mike McDaniel's fault. Like, here's the scapegoat. This team is going to be in shambles, I think, until the Davis family is no longer involved with the business. I really do. What else is there to say? The Raiders are in shambles. They're going to go nowhere this year. I do like the guy that they hired, a Compton guy, grew up a Raider fan. So I like the story there. I just think, it's not a one person's going to right this ship. There's so much wrong with it. I will say it is nice to see they're starting rebuilding middle of the season, at least give them a little jump start there. But before this ownership group starts to take accountability for some of these roster decisions, I think it's going to be same old Raiders over there in Las Vegas.
I mean, I feel like they thought that they were close. When they fired John Gruden, or John Gruden stepped down, however you want to call it, they went and made a push. They made the playoffs to beat the Chargers in the last game of the season to go and get into playoffs. The following season, they hire Mike McDaniel. They give up multiple first-round draft picks to go and get the best wide receiver in the NFL. And they made a lot of financial decisions as if they were getting ready to compete. And they found out last season that roster was not ready to compete. They gave up a lot of draft assets to go and get their guy at wide receiver with Devontae Adams. They signed Derek Carr to a massive extension that season just to let him walk the following year. They signed Chandler Jones to a big money contract. He ends up beating his wife or something like that. I can't exactly remember exactly what he did, but something wild and crazy that led to a domestic abuse charge, and he ends up getting released by the Raiders. They just found themselves in a really bad situation really quickly. They've drafted terribly over the last 5 years. I feel like the guys that you draft sets the culture for multiple years, and that culture was not good leading up to that point. And then after they let Derek Carr go, they replaced him with Jimmy Garoppolo, knowing that he's got this bad ankle injury. They had an opportunity to get out of that contract. They decided to stay into it. He's injured again. Now they're running out Aiden O'Connell and whoever else they can find, Brian Hoyer. They're a team that really went into like a bad place really, really quickly. And I just kind of want to say I told you so. Like they weren't ready. They were not ready to compete in any shape, form, or fashion.
No, and their timing is awful. The Chiefs are the Chiefs. Now they have a defense that's scary. The Chargers have a very promising roster, underperforming, which if I was a division rival, I would be scared that we're underperforming based off of the talent we have. It's just a matter of time, right? Is how I would be feeling. The Broncos really were a mess with the original Russell Wilson trade, but have acquired a lot of draft capital, have a really strong defense. I don't think Sean Payton is going to be the answer there, but that is a team who is on the rise. And then you have the Raiders just sitting there in the basement, thinking that they can contend with these other rosters in the AFC West. It's just funny. You can't help but laugh at this point.
They still haven't scored over 20 points this season. 17 against the Broncos, 10 against the Bills, 18 against the Steelers, 17 against the Chargers, 17 against the Packers. They scored 21 points against the Patriots, 12 against the Bears, 14. So like they've got one game where they've scored. They got to be at the league low of points per game. And I think it's wild that they made the decision to fire their coaching staff and their front office staff at 2 a.m. after the trade deadline. They had an opportunity to sell some of those assets to start this rebuild because they really got to tear it down, start completely over. They made the decision not to go after a quarterback with the 7th overall pick during the last draft. They ended up taking, which I thought was going to be a really good edge rusher, but they knew that they had issues at the quarterback position and they had a chance to trade up, give away some draft capital, and try to go and get yourself the quarterback of your future. I think that they thought that they could compete this year, and we knew looking at their roster that they were far from that.
No, and I guess like the next thing that I'm looking towards is that complete just rebuild. And I would love to see two of my favorite players at their respective positions, Devontae Adams and Max Crosby, find a home where they can be truly great and they could add to a competition. Because for those talents to be just buried with what Las Vegas wants to do, calling themselves a football team, I think it's a tribute to the game, to the fans, and would love to see those two folks in particular go find another home, preferably outside of the AFC West, if it's not with the Chargers, and preferably out of the division altogether. Or conference.
Yeah, so it looks like their season is lost. They're going to be headed toward a high round draft pick this coming season. They had an opportunity to sell off draft capital, and they failed to do so. Before the trade deadline, I think that the Chargers were shopping Trey McKitty. No takers for Trey McKitty. He ends up getting released. He was waived. And they ended up just signing Nick Vannett from the practice squad. So they've decided to go with the veteran and the Trey McKitty experiment. Kind of got to give credit to Tom Telesco for cutting ties when he did. 3rd round draft pick. I thought somebody would have, tried to kick the tires, throw a late round pick for the player. But he did not put up good enough film over the last couple of seasons. I think his rookie season, you saw some flashes of his ability as a run blocker, but that didn't carry over throughout the rest of his tenure with the Chargers. And I think that they found out that they've got a better group of tight ends on the roster, even with Gerald Everett injured. We saw a pretty decent game, and we'll get into the Bear game here in a minute, but we saw a pretty decent game from Donald Parham in place of Gerald Everett, who did not play last week. They seem to like Stone Smart and their 3rd guy, who's going to be a core special teamer for them, who gives them a better ability, I think, as a run blocker, and Nick Vannett. I just think that they just saw him. I'm a little surprised. I want to talk a little bit about the trade deadline, that they didn't really attack the trade deadline and try to get better at some positions, because we know like next year is not going to look like it does this year on this roster.
Yeah. bummed to see McKitty go, but I think it was time. We gave that guy a lot of chances, and it's just unfortunate it didn't amount to anything based off of where we selected him and the need there. I will say it's tough because you really don't know all that goes into these conversations. We don't know how active Tom was on the phones. I do think it is surprising that we didn't hear any rumblings of Chargers making serious acquisitions. I don't know how much of that is, revolves around the fact that we are very, very cap strapped as a team. But yeah, I was surprised to not even hear any, they're looking at this guy. I didn't think we were going to make a move. I thought everything had to be perfect for us to even be able to acquire anybody that would make a benefit or, would add to this team. But the fact that I wasn't even hearing, Chargers are thinking about making an offer to this guy. I thought that was kind of bizarre. Not sure if we even had any of those serious talks, how many of those just didn't get leaked, but interesting that, we weren't even in there wasn't even rumors that we were in discussions for anybody.
And I think that when you think about it, like any draft pick that you're giving up kind of crumbles your future a little bit. Knowing that if you're trading for a player, likely like let's say we went after Chase Young, right? And what Chase Young was sold for was pretty small relatively. I think they got him for like a 4th round draft pick, something like that, a 5th round draft pick. You're not signing him to an extension next year, right? Like this isn't a guy, this is a rental basically. And any guy that you're trading for, it's going to be a rental for the season. The Chargers, have a terrible cap situation going into next season. Really like 4 guys with over $30 million. And we need those draft picks if we're going to find a way to become cap healthy in future years. And these are guys that you're going to build around. I didn't see enough from the Chargers this season to believe that they can go and make a push for this season, knowing that it's going to crumble your future and knowing that you're not playing well this year in certain places. I think that there's issues along the offensive line at creating running lanes. I think that we're a little banged up in the secondary, primarily at safety. We seem to have just gotten a little healthier there. Outside of maybe another tight end, which you already believe that you've got a guy in the practice squad, Nick Vannett, who can kind of fill some of those roles. I did not see a good enough reason to give up draft capital this season, knowing that the 49ers got 6 first-round draft picks on the defensive line, knowing that the Chiefs easily handled the Chargers, and the fact that we're likely not going to be winning the AFC West this season based off of how far we already are behind and trying to crawl back into that fight. Knowing that the AFC has so many good quarterbacks, and based off of our roster and how we played at the midpoint of this season, it didn't make sense for you to go and trade for a guy this year with the eyes for a Super Bowl because we haven't shown it on the field.
No. And I think we said it last week. We are not a single. I will say, based off of the recent draft success, I think our draft picks are a lot valuable, or especially those first 2 rounds, these last 3 years. Tom Telesco has knocked it out of the park on those early picks. I would like for him to start hitting in those mid rounds. But I think you made a good point that this team is so strapped. We probably aren't going to compete this year. A lot of season left to be played, a lot to change. But yeah, that definitely looks like a defensive move looking towards the future, as opposed to throwing all our chips in again this year, tripling down on this all-in Justin Herbert hype. It seems like we might have just missed our peak by a year or two, which is unfortunate, but I do think it's going to be better for us in the long run and not going all in, like we saw from the Rams last year or a couple of seasons ago, who are absolutely in shambles and don't seem to be recovering very well either. So I don't want to be that.
Could see
a Super Bowl would be nice in there.
I'll let you finish your comment. All right. So, seems like you're always kind of lagging by like 5, 6, 7 seconds behind me, which is fine. But let's go ahead and get into the Bears game. Justin Herbert throws for 31 for 40, just under 300 yards, had 3 touchdowns, no turnovers, no sacks. It was a really efficient day for him. He ended up getting Quentin Johnson involved. Quentin Johnson finished with a career high in targets and receptions, 5 for 50. It's nice to see him getting rolling. Kind of more of a quiet game for Keenan Allen. He finished the game with 8 receptions for 69 yards. And then Austin Eckler kind of came alive for the first time since his week 1 rushing breakout game. He had finished the game with 7 receptions for 94 yards, 15 carries on 29 yards. Had a long of 7 yards. Wasn't a really good day for the Chargers overall on the ground. 25 total carries for 54 yards. That's good for 2.2 yards per carry, which is well below what we want to see. We want something closer to that 4.0 metric, but Justin Herbert sliced and diced his way through this Bears defense, especially in the first half. Give me a little bit about your thoughts on this game. I know you love talking Austin Eckler. I know he's one of your favorite players in the league. What is the issues that we're having here in the run game?
Layered question. I guess first, crisis averted for the second time this year. Wasn't a must-win from a number standpoint, but absolutely was a must-win from a moral and just emotional standpoint. This win needed to happen, and I'm glad we did it in as a blowout. It really was not that close from start to finish. So I like to see that. Offensively, I thought the passing game was awesome. Herbert was really, really effective, like you mentioned. I think there was even a couple of those on those 9 incompletions he had. I think there were a couple of those give me's that he kind of just airmailed. So was he, a healthy Herbert would have probably even had a more efficient game. So I thought the pass game was awesome. Talking about Austin Eckler, going back to what he is really good at, giving him the ball in space and going and making plays, 13.5 yards per reception when he's usually getting that ball a yard, if not a yard behind the line of scrimmage. Really effective. All his magic. This run game has been atrocious. I'm glad that we didn't completely abandon it like we have seen from like the Lombardi schemes. With Kellen Moore, the play action is so important. So even if you are averaging 2 yards per carry, you still need to do those attempts to be able to, legitimize the play action that has been so effective during Justin Herbert's time here. There's a lot of missing pieces. I think getting Austin Eckler back healthy, getting him back in his rhythm, that's going to be very important. Getting this new continuity on the offensive line, I think the last couple of weeks we were thinking, Corey Lindsey, he might be coming back eventually. I think it's about time that we need to kind of game plan for the fact that Corey Lindsey might not be back this season. He might not be healthy enough to play football ever again. So, prayers out to him, his family. I hope all the best for him. But reality has to set in for this football team that we're not going to really be able to rely on that guy. So next guy up, reestablishing this continuity. I can't say that word. It's a fucking tough word. Reestablishing that camaraderie with the new guys, knowing that, Will Clapp, you're going to be our center. So you got to get going. I think that's going to be valuable. I think real big key is getting Josh Kelly more involved. I thought he has been so effective with his touches, and he's only seen the ball 6 or 7 times a game. And he's been really effective with those touches. I think that's going to keep Austin Eckler a lot fresher. I think Josh Kelly has been running the football between the tackles a lot more effectively so far this season. And that'll keep Eckler fresh in the passing game where I think he is at his best. So I would like to see a lot more Josh Kelly. And I think this being able to have this consistent O-line coming in week out, avoiding the injuries, I think once they get their rhythm, their camaraderie together, we'll start rolling a little more. But 2 yards a carry is not going to cut it. Even if you have a fantastic quarterback in Justin Herbert. He's not going to be able to bail you out every game. And, most defenses aren't as awful as the Chicago Bears team that we just played.
And I think a lot of people are calling this game as a blowout. I think that when you look at the turnovers and some of the big stops that the Chargers had, yeah, it was a blowout. But this game was actually a lot closer than a lot of people were actually realizing. So Chargers had 20 total first downs. Bears had 17 total first downs. Chargers had 352 total yards. Bears had 295. Bears had 2 turnovers, the 2 interceptions. Chargers had the 1 fumble. Time of possession, 31-28, kind of fell in the favor of the Chargers. I think that really Chargers got a lot of big breaks. You look at the first play of the game, the 40-yard bomb, right? And you look at the fact that he was untouched. Had the officials not blown that dead, you're looking at potentially 7 points, at least an additional 3. They ended up getting a stop on that first drive. Now the game is 30-20, 30-21, right? If that play isn't blown dead. Then you've got the dropped Velus Jones touchdown. That took points off the board. So you're looking at a 27-30 game. This was a much closer game than a lot of people are realizing. I think that we had some turnovers in our favor at some crucial points in the game. We had the 4th down stop. But in the grand scheme of things, the Chargers did not blow out the Bears. The Chargers got some breaks. I think that they played a much cleaner game overall. Penalties-wise, you had 2 versus their 7. You look at Justin Herbert pushing the ball down the field, not deep shots, but just driving the team down the field, scoring points in the first half. In the second half, the Chargers scored 6 points. That's it, just 6 points. They took their foot off the gas. It's fine. They milked the clock. They did what they needed to do, but they did it through the air. It's not like they came out, ran the ball down their throats, and controlled the time of possession. That's not the type of deep second half that we had. We had a very stagnant offense in the second half. And really, like this, if we would have blown them out, it would have been 41-13. We didn't blow them out. We on the score did, but you take 14 points off the game. This is a totally different game. Velus Jones catches that game, and Asante Samuel, who gave up that bomb, if that play wasn't called dead, you're talking about a 3-point game. This was not a blowout, even though the score shows it.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess I'm always hesitant to play the what if game because what happened is what happened. So you made the plays, you had to make the plays. I mean, we could play what if, what if Justin Herbert didn't injure his finger? Would he have hit all of those touchdowns? Like now we're talking different games. We could be 7-0. So I think I think you make a good point. We definitely did get some breaks. I don't want to take that away. But we made the plays that we needed to when we needed to. End of the day, we won 30-13. And I think I guess you got to move on. You got to take what you got. And that was our best game, I think, from start to finish that we've seen all year. Definitely a trend in the right direction. I don't think everything was fixed up, but better than what we saw, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and I get that. The issue that I just have, though, is I've been listening to other podcasts. I've been listening to other people talk about it. And when you look at the stats they were, like, this wasn't a blowout. This was a significant win for the Chargers because they got a lead. They held the lead. They extended the lead a little bit. But in the grand scheme of things, like, had this been a Jaguars team, had this been a Chiefs game, had this been any other game, the Chargers are turning this into a close game. They had no ability to control the clock using the ball. In the second half, I'm okay if you finish 30-13 and you are methodically moving the ball down the field with chunks of rushing yards, 3 yards here, 4 yards here. Chargers average 2.2 yards per carry against a bad team. We are this wasn't a blowout. We just beat a bad team that just was starting a quarterback or a quarterback who's in his second game, who really struggles offensively to move the ball. He still completed 25 of 37, 237 yards. Probably should have had 3 interceptions. The Sante Samuel interception was super close, but like what I'm seeing is a Chargers team that finished a game against a bad team, but if they were a good team, this would have been a 41-13. Like, we had so much more opportunity. We gave up some big plays still. Like, this was not a good game for the Chargers, even though the scoreboard shows it, even though the win shows it, even though, like, we as Charger fans feel good about this game, because it was a lot closer than a lot of people are realizing. And I'm tired of hearing that, oh, we blew out the Bears. We beat a bad team by a good amount. We didn't beat a bad team by the way that we should. And that's what I want to get across to a lot of Charger fans is this still was not good enough. I'm glad that we kept the penalties at bay, but like we did not control this game. We just came out to a lead and we held the lead, but we didn't beat the brakes off this team like everyone is saying we did. It just didn't happen.
Okay, yeah, I'm on board with you. It was an okay performance. It was a really great outcome. Far from a great performance and far from a blowout win.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. In terms of the injury report, I haven't seen it yet. I do know that we got a couple players that are banged up that we're expecting work from. Joshua Palmer being out, that's kind of a big deal because when he went out with that knee injury, I was terrified. Seeing him like screaming it from the tent is what I was hearing from reports. The way that he looked coming off that field, it looked like he just tore his ACL. He was out for the season. Somehow comes back like a series later. Like he wasn't even out for all that long. Chargers had an opportunity to go and potentially bring in another wide receiver. I think luckily we have Jalen Guyton coming back into the fold. Luckily we got Quentin Johnston involved. Luckily we still have Keenan Allen. Donald Parham came through when we needed it to. Chargers injuries like Gerald Everett and Josh Palmer, 2 guys to watch this week because those guys are going to play a major factor in the Chargers offense moving forward. I haven't seen the injury report quite yet for the who are we playing? The Jets coming up. Kind of give me a little bit of your thoughts on what you're expecting from Tito and Jalen Guyton, who should be coming back this week.
Yeah, I'm really excited for both of those guys. Let's start with Jalen Guyton, who I think is going to be, based off of where we're at as roster construction, I think is going to make the most immediate impact, first game back. That's because we need a guy who can run the deep route effectively, who can create separation downfield, and who is going to give us a dynamic of this offense that we haven't seen since, he's went out with that injury. How many of the highlights from, our last 2 intro videos are Jalen Guyton bombs? Like, some of the best Herbert throws are 70 yards in his direction. So being able to bring back the big play guys that, we had been missing this last season or so, going to be super awesome to see, and really excited to see how Jalen Guyton fits into the new Kellen Moore system. Otito, I think based off of, how great our interior line has been playing, getting Austin Johnson back, Nick Williams has been great. Sebastian Joseph Day is a staple up there, and Morgan Fox is just demanding more playtime every time he steps out there. And then I don't think you could sleep on our 6th round draft pick, Scott Matlock. Based off of that, though, Otito's a different guy. He is a pure nose tackle, a thick run stuffer. I definitely going to see him on some of those short to go distances, stacking them in there. He's a guy who moves the pile. So being able to bring his skill set to interior defensive line that I think has been playing well, a lot better than recent seasons. I think a really big highlight of this season so far has been our interior defensive line play. I think there's still a spot for him. We don't have very many people his stature and with his ability to just absolutely plug running holes. So being able to bring him back into the fold, it's going to be a rotation, so he's not going to have to come right out the gates with a full workload. I think that's going to be good for him. It's going to be good for the team, and yeah, excited to see his development in his second season.
Yeah, I'm excited to see both of you guys come back. I know they've been working really hard at getting back. Tito played a lot more last season. I thought we were expecting him to play, and I think that him bringing depth to that defensive line is going to be huge. I'm a little worried about Jalen coming back, potentially reducing the workload that's already really light for Quentin Johnson, which is a hot topic right now. I feel like this game, Quentin Johnson built a lot of confidence. Coming off five, he was targeted 6 times. He came down with 5 of them. They gave him the jump ball that he didn't end up coming down, which is fine. That's okay. But even when he got the ball in his hands, that drag underneath that we've been begging the Chargers to run to him, where he caught that, made a guy miss, and then he churned forward for positive yards. We haven't seen that from Quentin Johnson since he was at TCU. So that's awesome to see. And I think that we're getting some guys healthy. I would love to go and get our all-pro center back some point this season. Hopefully it happens. Who knows? Hopefully, the man, the player, the father is able to, make that decision in a positive way, making sure that he is healthy, that he's got the heart condition kind of figured out. Probably blood clots is if I'm remembering kind of how offensive linemen have those heart issues. I just think back to our own left tackle from a couple seasons ago, who was dealing with the blood clots. But I mean, I think that we're getting healthy with the right players at the right time. Yeah, Russell Okung. Let's talk a little bit about the Jets. I'll let you kind of just start off. Jets, I think they got a really good defense, and I think they're starting to figure things out on the offensive side of the ball. Give me a little bit about your thoughts. Are the Jets a real team? Are they a good team? And how do you think that it's going to affect this game?
Yeah, what a roller coaster of a year for the New York Jets, and that's a tough question to answer. And to be honest, I don't have a good gauge one way or the other. You talk about this team adding a Super Bowl winner, a former MVP in Aaron Rodgers, with a very talented young core of skill positions and a really talented defense. This was a big Super Bowl contender, in the offseason. He goes out early on in the year. All hope is lost because you got to go back to Zach Wilson, who they've already formally given up on. And turns out he's not as half bad as we remember. Play some good games against some good teams, beat the Bills in overtime, played the Chiefs to a field goal game, just beat the Eagles. This is a team that's really hard to peg. I think we're getting them at a very, very scary time when they went from a team with high expectations at the beginning of the year to second, third week, no expectations, to now they beat some good teams. Now we're starting to think, looking at this defense who has only given up more than 23 points one season, and it was in a loss against the Cowboys. This is a team that's hard to pick, and I think they are playing with very low expectations. A team that has been written off mid-season. That's scary, especially when you look at the defensive side of the ball. I don't think this is going to be a really, really tough game offensively, because of all the bodies they have. They are not weak at any level of that defense. And then on the other side, with the Breece Halls, with the Garrett Wilsons, they have a lot of guys who can hurt you, and they can hurt you quick. So this is a tough game. I think it's matchup wise very detrimental to what the Chargers like to do. I think this is a very, very good game to prove what kind of team are we. This is a good football team who is on the up, who is playing with low expectations. That's dangerous. If we could beat this team and do it convincingly, I will start to, rewind back my sentiments towards Brandon Staley and the season's over, this would be one of those wins where I could start getting back on board to maybe we could make a push, because I think this team has a lot of really, really talented pieces.
Yeah, I think they're a really good and well-coached team, and well-coached teams will take average teams and they'll make playoffs. Zach Wilson has played a little bit better than I think a lot of people were expecting, but he's by no means blowing anybody out. So he's only completing 58% of his passes. He's currently got 1,300 yards, 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Those guys who are at 50-50 on the touchdown to interception ratio, they're just getting by. They are just getting by, and they're doing just enough that they need to do with not making massive turnovers and 5 interceptions in half the season. That's about average, right? So you're looking at like Justin Herbert last season, I think finished with like 12 interceptions. He's not turning the ball over quite that much. Once every other game is kind of coming what it's coming out to be. He's doing just enough to keep his team in the hunt. This team runs through 2 players offensively. It runs through Breece Hall, and it runs through Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson currently has 39 receptions on 68 targets. Really, like, Zach Wilson's just not very accurate. He's only got 2 touchdowns this season. He was one of my fantasy darlings. I thought this guy was going to kill it. But, you know, I think that who they have at quarterback, it just isn't good enough. I think the Chargers going to have a couple opportunities to get some turnovers in the passing game. You know, the ball's going to Garrett Wilson a lot. He is leading the team in targets. He's got 68 targets. The next 2 closest players, Allen Lazard, Tyler Conklin, under 30. So, you know, in the passing game, who it's going to. They've got their main threat. And then Breece Hall, last season, like before he had the ACL injury, was going to be Rookie of the Year. Ends up going to his teammate, right, Garrett Wilson, but he's averaging 5.7 yards per carry. They are feeding him a lot. And don't forget that Dalvin Cook is on this team. He's not getting near the number of opportunities, 41 carries, 114 yards, not a major part of their offense. Michael Carter also is a good player. Only 8 carries. When he's in the ball, it's in the passing game. He's gotten 44 targets. He is their dump-off option. He is their safety release valve. He is that guy in the passing attack, not a big player in the rushing game. But this team really, it just runs through 2 major players, those 2 major players being Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. You take those 2 guys out of the game plan, you're going to win this game offensively. Defensively is a totally different kind of situation because they're a really good, well-coached defensive team with a defensive-minded coach. Tell me a little bit about these weapons. And you know, what is the keys to beating this team from an offensive skill position standpoint?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Slowing Breece Hall down, that's the key. If we get to a point where we need Zach Wilson to make a 2-minute drive to win the game, that's a good position to be in if you're a Charger player or a fan. I don't think he's done just enough. I think he's very in the mold of a Jimmy Garoppolo, a Joe Flacco, who just plays on a really good defensive team. Just don't turn the ball over, and you're gonna win some games. Breece Hall, I think, is what really gets me scared, because we don't notoriously have a great run defense. We've struggled with that in Staley's tenure here with the team. And he's a big back who can, if you give him some space, he could really, really hurt you. I need to see a good game from the run game. What I will say, I really liked last week how it was the first week all year where we didn't let the number 1 receiving option absolutely torch. DJ Moore was targeted 6 times, caught 4 for 55 yards, no touchdowns, a long of 18 yards. For an explosive guy like DJ Moore, I'm going to take that. If we can hold Garrett Wilson to something similar, give Breece Hall a pedestrian type of day, and get the pressure over Zach Wilson so he has to throw the ball 30, 35 times a game, that's the recipe, in my opinion, how to get after them defensively. Take away the run game, make them throw the ball more than they want to. And if you can limit Garrett Wilson to under 60 yards, I think that's the recipe that I'm rolling out if I'm Brandon Staley.
Defensively, this is a really, really good team, and they're a little weird just kind of looking across their stats on their defensive line. But I mean, you're talking about Quincy Williams, C.J. Mosley, Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson, DJ Reed. This team is stacked, especially on the defensive line and especially in the box. This is probably a team that's going to really make things difficult on the Chargers run game. I think this is the best run defense that they've seen all year. And they're getting it from players you were not necessarily expecting. Bryce Huff is got 38 pressures, 4 sacks as one of their edge rushers. John Franklin Myers, also really good edge rusher, 29 total pressures, 1 sack. They don't have any sacks from Quinnen Williams. I think that's going to change this week. But Quinnen Williams has 25 pressures. It hasn't gotten to the quarterback at all. But you also I forgot that they drafted Will McDonald in the first round and has only played 66 total snaps in comparison to a lot of these players that are in the 400s, 300 and 400. So they've got a rotation there. One trend that I'm seeing across the NFL, if you got a good defensive line, you got a good defense. And they are in no shortage of guys on the defensive line. They got some big, heavy guys in there. A lot of guys, just PFF is grading, 8 guys over a 70 overall defensive grade. Take that for what it's worth, but they usually get their high grades pretty right. If you're sitting, 77 or above, you're playing good football this year. And they've got 8 of those guys already. They get pressure on the quarterback. And don't forget, their coverage corners are really, really good as well. Sauce Gardner is really, really good. DJ Reed's really, really good. This is a defensive-minded head coach who just knows how to get things done on the defensive side of the ball. He puts guys in places where they're going to succeed, and it's going to be the Chargers' best defense that they probably play all year.
No, and I was going to say that earlier, but it didn't feel right. But then now taking a look at this depth chart, and I think I'm going to reiterate your sentiment that this defense is absolutely stacked. You mentioned John Franklin Myers and Bryce Huff. We forgot their second first-round pick from last year, Jermaine Johnson, who we were really high on, the what is it called? The Last Chance U star, went to Florida State. That he
killed it at the Senior Bowl.
And he's not even number 3 in pressures. You mentioned, killed it. You mentioned Will McDonald, who they just drafted in their first round this past year, who's not even seeing the field. They have Solomon Thomas buried on the depth chart. They even have Carl Lawson, who they brought over from Cincinnati, who was a starter for them a season ago before they got Jermaine Johnson. They got bodies. Then they could just roll them out at you, and they will. And that's just 4 positions amongst the defensive line. Looking to the corners, Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, they're going to make it tough for you. I think I really like their nickel corner, Michael Carter II. Another depth position, Bryce Hall is on this team who doesn't really see the field because they're just so stacked. Looking up top, Tony Adams, Jordan Whitehead, a pretty solid safety duo. Not anything over the top, but again, depth. You got Adrian Amos not even starting for this team. C.J. Mosley, we know what he could do. We've seen him ball out in Baltimore. You got Quincy Williams as that weak side linebacker. This is a really good football team. I hope Justin Herbert's hand is feeling better. If not, that the team definitely needs to get that wrapped up, if not in a hard cast, because these guys are going to get after the quarterback. They like to rough them up. This is a scary game as far as matchups go, and I just hope the Chargers bring their A game, because they're going to need their best game and some to even contend with the talent they have on the other side of the ball.
They definitely have the best linebacking duo in the NFL right now. And then it just makes it so easy for those linebackers with the front that they have in front of them. This is probably going to be a low-scoring game. I think that they're going to really struggle offensively to put points on the board. I think we're also going to really struggle, and I think it's going to be for 2 different reasons. We're going to be playing a really, really good defense. Our defense is going to be playing a 2-dimensional offense in the Jets. I feel like this is going to be one of those grinded out 14-17 types of games that could go either way. You're probably going to see a lot more field goal attempts. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like a 15-12 all field goal type of game for the Chargers. I think that they have some weapons that are really dangerous on the offensive side of the ball. And then we just know about all those weapons on the defensive side of the ball. I really like their head coach. Robert Saleh is going to become coach of the year if he gets this team to a playoff game without Aaron Rodgers in the mix. Imagine if Aaron Rodgers was healthy. Imagine that. Like, that would be insane. Give me kind of your final score predictions, and we'll go ahead and get out of here. This is on Monday Night Football, which is going to be great. How's this game going to end?
Let's go. Am I back? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Cool. I'm with you. I think this is going to be one of those grind out games. I hope this is another one we get lucky in, because I think it is going to be one of those just fall in your favor type of games. You know, getting lucky with the defensive pick six or a big return. We'd love to see Darius Davis get loose, because I think he's been close on a couple returns this season. We saw him do it in the preseason. It would be nice to see him get that first one in the NFL. I think this is going to be a big defensive, if not special teams play to get this team over the top. I'm going 2014 Chargers win with a Cameron Dicker field goal, 54 yards to seal it. Love what I've seen from Dicker so far this year. This is the first time in like 10 years I've actually watched Charger field goals. I used to have to leave the room, bury my eyes, and bring battery acid into it so I can't see for 3 days. Starting to like what I see from Cameron Dicker. So that's going to be my prediction. 2014 with a Cameron Dicker field goal to walk it off.
Yeah, Cameron Dicker has been hitting from over 50 consistently. And the fact that he has been like really allowing us to go and take some of those longer, because in years past, like Brandon Staley has been forced to kind of go for it a lot during that kind of area of the field. And now he's got complete confidence to, hit those. I'm so glad we just don't have special teams issues for the first time in a couple of years. So like, that's just happy in itself. I think it's going to be a tight game. It's going to be a 3-point game. It's going to be like 9-12, 12-15. Like you said, like 20-14. That's going to be 2 field goals that'll get you to 20, something in that nature. It's going to be a close game, and it's actually going to be a really good game to watch on Monday Night Football. So stoked to see it. I think that's all we got for today. I think I covered everything that's kind of Charger news, from the draft to the game at the Bears to the Monday Night Football game. And this is going to be a fun Monday Night Football game, because I think it's 2 teams trending in opposite directions who are good at opposite sides of the ball. And that should be fun to watch. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will talk to you guys next week.
I will say, I'm excited for this.
Go for it.
No, I was going to say I'm really excited for our second primetime game. Really want to get a win, but really, really excited for the next week where I could watch my Chargers play during Sunday. I don't remember the last time we watched a game on a Sunday with the Chargers were playing. Either way,
there,
second primetime game. I'm excited for it. I know.
All right.
It feels like a lifetime ago.